spaghetti bolognese. What you'll need while you watch this demonstration is your copy of the recipe, and I'd like you to have a pen or a pencil, and as I go through each ingredient and each step of the method, I'd like you to tick it off. Also, if there's any changes along the way, you can add those in. Let's get started. First, you obviously need to collect your ingredients. So the ingredients listed are 2 teaspoons of olive oil, just collecting that in a bowl or a cup, half a large brown onion, and it's asking us to coarsely chop it. So I've collected my onion, 1 garlic clove, 250 grams of beef mince. Now 4-star beef mince just means that it's fairly lean, there's not a lot of fat. In the packets when you collect them, it's likely to be half a packet, just to save you some time with measuring it out, but making sure you bring over a bowl and a fork or a spoon, something to scoop your mince, not using your hands. 1 teaspoon of Master Food Spaghetti Bolognese seasoning. So that way all of the herbs we need are combined into the one mixture in here. Half a medium carrot, grated, so we'll be grating that one. That means we can leave the skin on, we'll just wash it. Half a zucchini grated, again leaving the skin on for nutrition, just washing the outside. Half a celery stick finely chopped. So we don't want to grate celery because it's very fibrous, but again we would need to wash it because often there's some dirt down the bottom here, and then going to use our knife skills to chop it up really small into the smallest cubes that you can. We then have 200 grams or half of a can of diced tomatoes, so you can share a can with another group or come up to the bench with a jug and tip in half a can of diced tomatoes. Our recipe also calls for 1 cup, which is 250 mils of liquid beef stock. This is going to give our bolognese some flavour and some saltiness. Making sure you bring a jug over and accurately pouring to the 1 cup line. We also need 250 grams of spaghetti. Now the packets we're working with are 500 grams, so you're sharing a packet with another group or taking half of a packet back to your bench and having something to store it in. Basil leaves to serve. I'd like you to cross that one out for today. Instead, we're just going to use Parmesan to serve. If you made this again at home, you could put basil on top. Cross out the basil, but write 1 tablespoon next to the Parmesan. That will be plenty to sprinkle on top to add a cheese flavour and a bit more saltiness. So now before I get started with step 1, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and prepare my vegetables, and then we'll continue from there. So I've now prepared my vegetables. I've grated the carrot and zucchini as the recipe said and kept them in separate piles. I've chopped up the celery fairly small into small cubes, and I also actually added in some baby spinach that we had spare. So in your ingredients list, if you'd like to add some extra nutrition, can you add 1 handful of baby spinach chopped up? The other ingredients I've prepared is the onion. I've chopped that up fairly small, and garlic at the back here. I've kept everything separate because the recipe tells us to add different things to the pan at different times, so that's important. There's also lots to collect today. So on your recipe, when it's time to go to your kitchen and your turn to cook, I want you to divide up the ingredients and have one person collecting all of the vegetables and the other person collecting the pasta and the meat and the sauces. So that will be important to save you some time today. Let's move on to step number 1. In our method, it says heat the oil in a large, heavy base saucepan. I'm going to tip the oil in, spread it around in my saucepan. Over a medium heat. Add the onion and garlic and cook for 2 minutes until the onion starts to soften. Then I'm going to increase the heat and add the meat. So first of all, I need to add in my onion and garlic. So this is why it was important that I kept everything separate. So in goes the onion, in goes the garlic, and I'm now going to turn that on to a medium heat and cook for 2 minutes, and then I'll show you what it looks like. 2 minutes has passed. My onion has started to soften. I can smell the onion and garlic flavours, so that means it's ready now to add in my mince and turn up the heat. When you add the mince in, it's important that we continue to stir to break up the mince, and the recipe tells us to cook for 5 minutes or until the mince has browned. So there shouldn't be any pink colour left, it should be brown. I'm going to add that in and stir it around and show you what it looks like in 5 minutes time. My 5 minutes is nearly up and my beef is nearly done. What's important with this step is that you are using your wooden spoon to break up the mince rather than just stirring it to break it up so it becomes nice and small. You don't want big chunks of meat in your bolognese. I'm going to show you now what it's looking like. Looking really good, all brown, and I can see the onion and the garlic coming through too. So it's now time to move on to step 2. Step 2 tells us to stir in the bolognese seasoning, so I'm going to tip that in and stir that through with the carrot, zucchini and celery. Now I'm adding in spinach today too. If you've chosen to, can you add spinach to that step number 2 in the recipe? Zucchini, carrot, celery and spinach all getting added in and having a good stir around. Now in the recipe it tells us to cook this for 3 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to stir this and cook for 3 minutes and show you what it's done at the end. So 3 minutes has passed and I've been stirring the vegetable and the meat mixture. It doesn't look a whole lot different, but what I can see and feel when I'm stirring it is the vegetables have started to soften. We're now ready to move to the next step, which is add the diced tomatoes and the beef stock, so the liquid ingredients in to the pan. It tells us to bring them to the boil. So that means using a high heat on your fry pan until the mixture starts to bubble. Bubbles mean boiling. Once we have brought it to boil, it asks us to reduce the heat to medium-low and simmer for 10 minutes. Now simmering doesn't mean large bubbles. Simmering means small bubbles, particularly around the edge and in the center. Okay, so I'm going to stir my mixture, make sure it's up really high, and look for those things to happen. Basically, bringing it to the boil means we want to get it hot quickly, but then we want to have it at a temperature that is going to nicely cook the vegetables and the meat rather than cook it too quickly. So that's the plan. I'm now going to let that warm up, come to the boil, and then simmer for 10 minutes. So let's start that process now. While that's happening, the recipe tells us in step number 3, meanwhile, cook spaghetti in a saucepan of boiling water following the packet directions. Now this spaghetti we're using takes 12 minutes. Can you add that to your recipe now? Cook for 12 minutes when the water is boiling. So I've got my large pot. I'm going to use the large one today because our spaghetti is long. It's easier to fit inside this large pot. I have filled it with hot water from the tap. The reason I filled it with hot water is because it's going to boil quicker because it's already halfway there. I've got it 2/3 to 3/4 full. I'm going to turn it on my biggest element on the stovetop and bring it to the boil. When it's boiling, I will add the spaghetti in and show you that process. Turning on my gas stovetop, turning the dial and sparking to release the gas. Just a reminder about heating that. What I can see now is happening is I've got boiling large rapid bubbles happening with my sauce. So I'm going to show you, and it will start to stop bubbling as I take it off the heat, but large bubbles. So that tells me it's ready now to reduce down to medium, just to simmer. I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. Now, my water is about to boil, so let me show you that spaghetti step. Lid comes off carefully. Spaghetti is going to go into the pot, but it won't fully immerse in the water yet. Let me show you that. Because it's too long, it's poking out. So what I need to do is let the spaghetti that's in the water soften for about a minute, and then I'll be able to use my tongs to push the rest of the spaghetti down into the water for the 12-minute time. I'll show you what that looks like. So my spaghetti now has softened enough that I could push the rest safely under the water, and it's beginning to bubble again. So I start my timer for 12 minutes. And you've only got one timer on your oven, so you might need to clock or your phone to time the spaghetti. before you set it for your bolognese sauce. You can also see the bolognese is simmering away with some small bubbles in the centre, and now we just need a plate. So this would be a great time to start cooking your dishes, and I will show you how to safely drain the pasta shortly. To safely drain your pasta, you need to have an empty, clean sink. Place your colander in the sink so no one has to be holding it, and carefully tipping away from yourself the bowl of hot cooked pasta so that the steam and the hot water isn't at risk of splashing you. Remembering that that's quite hot, so don't wash your saucepan just yet. Give the colander a little shake to remove any excess liquid, and then your pasta is ready to serve. The sauce has been cooking for 10 minutes and all of the liquid, or most of it, has evaporated, so that's ready to serve, and the vegetables are softened. So let's now, using our tongs, serve up half the pasta into each bowl. I'll just show you one bowl. Good amount of spaghetti, maybe it's a little bit too much, let's take some out. And then a nice big scoop or two of our bolognese sauce on top. So this is a really decent size, a dinner size meal for you today. And then we're going to garnish with the Parmesan cheese. Nice sprinkle on top. And there we have our delicious bowl of bolognese that includes lots of vegetables, so it's not only really nutritious, it's got some carbohydrates, some protein from the meat, and lots of veggies, really healthy and natural because we know everything that's gone into the dish. Okay, it's your turn now.